Hello, everyone. Welcome in. This is Aaron St. Denis. You can find me on Twitter at FFMadScientist. I am back today for another edition of the Mad Science Lab podcast, brought to you by the combination of the Fantasy Football Universe and the Fantasy Football Advice Network. Today, we are going to continue on with the 2024 Dynasty Risers and Fallers. Sorry, I've been all rookies all day long. I got it programmed into my brain. This is actual veterans, Dynasty Risers and Fallers. And we've got Jeremy Popielarz, also known as @PopesFFH. How's it going, Jeremy?
I'm excited to talk about some risers and some fallers. I love Dynasty season, and those players go unnoticed at this point in time. They really do. We like you are currently in your mind. It's rookie season, right?
I was gonna say,
so everybody's talking about rookies, and including the podcast host at the moment. But they get a little bit swept under the rug, and sometimes this is the time you can find that value, especially with rookie fever, etc. So I'm excited.
I was just going to say that. How weird is it for you to be sitting here talking rookies, or not rookies? I got it programmed in my head. I can't stop talking rookies. It's all we do. How weird is this to talk actual NFL players?
It's out there, but I try to get some of that content out this time. It is important. It's still there. A lot of these rookies, we love them. We'll fall in love with them, but they don't always hit. So if you can make a play for a veteran at this point, you might be sitting a little bit prettier come, September.
Alrighty. Before we get into it, do you want to take a second here and tell everyone where they can find you and your content?
Yeah, so you can find me. You already plugged it at the @PopesFFH on X. That's pretty much where you can find pretty much all my links and stuff like that. I link every article, any podcast, anything that I do will be over there. If you want to listen to my minute voice, you can follow the FTN Dynasty podcast. I have that, which we roll out a lot of episodes. We're currently rolling through some rookie prospect profiles as well with my co-host Adam Pfeiffer. Those are pretty good episodes. We'll highlight some of the better names, and then any written works over at ftnfantasy.com.
All right, sweet. Let's get right into it. We will start with your riser, Buffalo running back James Cook. He is going into his third year. He has finished as RB44 and RB12 in PPR scoring. Last year, he had 237 carries for 1,122 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Also added in 44 catches on 54 targets for 445 yards and 4 touchdowns. I am a well-documented detractor of keep, trade, cut, but I like to use them this time of year so we can see what the general public thinks of these guys. They have Cook 53rd overall in single QB scoring or single QB leagues, ranked as RB10, whereas Fantasy Pros has him 33rd overall and RB12. So you can see the Fantasy Pros experts have him significantly higher up because they love them some running backs. Where do you have Cook? And overall, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so for me with James Cook, I have him fairly high. He's on that borderline, a little bit closer to probably Fantasy Pros in a positional. He's somewhere in that running back 10 to 15 range. Obviously, we have to respect that lack of touchdown production. I'm a Bills fan. You can see it in the background if you're watching this. If you're not and you're listening, there are a lot of Bills helmets behind me. But yes, I am a
7. That's not a Bills jersey, is it? Behind you?
Oh no, that's J.K. Dobbins. Let's not talk about that.
I was gonna say that does not look like a Bills jersey.
Yeah, that one still hurts. Could have been a great one. But anyways, we're talking about James Cook here, Aaron. Yes, all right. But yes, James Cook. We have to respect the fact that there's Josh Allen's their red zone guy. It's a little hard to really find that end zone opportunity on the ground for James Cook, despite being a fairly good red zone runner. He doesn't get the credit he does inside the tackles, but again, we have to respect that he doesn't really get it. You said it, 6 total touchdowns, but he was still that RB12 in PPR. He was RB11 in half PPR. So he's right on that cusp of borderline running back 1. Really kind of broke out this year. He had 9 top 24 finishes and 5 RB1 weeks. So, and this is half PPR scoring, at least stuff that I have pulled up. But we're talking about a guy that has been kind of consistently inside that top 24 for more than the weeks. And that's really where I draw my cutoff with running backs. Once you get past the running back 24, you're really talking like 8-7 points. And even PPR scoring at that point, you're really not talking. I mean, they're in there, but like you're better off probably with a wide receiver 3 or 4 at that point, just in the standard scoring the way it is now. But he finished last year, according to FTN data, with a 12.7% avoided tackle rate. He had 1.87 yards after contact. He did actually have what was kind of a workhorse role with 54% of the snaps. He had a 27% opportunity share. He carried 62.2% of running back carries for the Bills last year. So despite not really getting that red zone work, he was really still their workhorse running back. We saw a huge bump as soon as Joe Brady came in, as opposed to Ken Dorsey. So really looking forward, it looks pretty good here with that retaining him. You add in the Bills cap hell, and it's unlikely that they bring anybody in to really supplement him in a like high level talent capacity outside of drafting somebody. But I also don't think they go there because they have plenty of needs at the receiver position, X, Y, and Z. So I do think that James Cook is a pretty secure asset at this point in time. I really do think that you've got a good couple of years out of him still. And although he's not going to be ever probably a top 5 guy, I'm signing up for an RB12, RB15 all day if I can get that consistency out of him, especially in that PPR format with the passing game. And I expect him to just get better as it goes on. Time goes on, they get a little bit better. So
I feel like there needs to be like a Tuesday morning support group for the fantasy managers who own James Cook and DeAndre Swift and just cry about all the quarterback touchdowns that were vultured. It's the same thing with both of them, except Cook obviously I think has the higher ceiling at this point, but just touchdown after touchdown vultured by the quarterback. And that's really what's limiting Cook's upside or overall ceiling, I think.
Yeah, and I mean DeAndre Swift's an interesting case this offseason as well, being a free agent.
Yeah.
I mean, he lost a ton of his passing work, which you would argue that James Cook and DeAndre Swift were very similar when DeAndre was in Detroit. You know, they're a similar player. Yeah, he doesn't necessarily probably really have a consistent top 12 production ability, but those weeks that he scores a touchdown, he's like a top 5 guy just because of how much he's getting in the passing game, the lack of weapons on that Bills offense at the current moment. I think they can rely on him, and they may have to, depending on what they do in the offseason. So another guy that just does easy points in PPR. We always like to see those clips on X, at least I do. A guy earning 1.4 PPR points. It's a running back running for, 14, 15 yards, and it's a receiver catching a ball for, 2 yards, or a running back coming out of the backfield and catching it for a yard and a catch, which is 1.1 points. So it's like they're easy points. And it does help you kind of buoy them a little bit. And we're seeing a running back position that's just being depleted. And guys that are getting this 62, 60, 50% type of workload are valuable to us in fantasy, considering the league's going to a lot of these running back by committees. And you're seeing guys in the 30s and 40s when you're talking about carry percentages and opportunity shares and stuff like that. And I expect that to get even worse. You're getting a lot of a high profile free agent class. They're not a super strong running back class, but it's a deeper running back class than it's given credit as far as like that complementary role guys go. And so you could start to see a lot of this kind of split backfield where you got a runner and a pass catcher, where James Cook really, I don't think that's going to happen to him a ton this season.
Yeah, the days of the bell cow are long gone. And like you said, there's plenty of, if they do go with a rookie, it's not someone who really threatens his job. There's lots of free agent running backs, but they're not going to be in the market for any of them, even though there's, half dozen of them. Let's take a look here at the tiers. We'll start with Cook is the top player in tier 2 for running backs, according to Fantasy Pros. I'm going to start, or he's the top of tier 3. I want to ask you about the 3 guys at the bottom of tier 2, if you would take Cook over any of them. They are Ken Walker, Saquon Barkley, Rachaad White. Is he behind all 3 of them for you?
So it was Ken Walker,
Barkley, White. Yeah. Similar tier, above. You don't have to be spot on. I'm not going to hold you to it, but
maybe Ken Walker would be below him at this point in time.
You taking Barkley over him despite his age and not knowing where he's going to play?
I'm going to say no. The only reason that I say no to that is I do love James Cook. I'm going to double check my Dynasty rankings at FTN because I don't want to misspeak here. Well, I guess I do have Ken Walker ranked higher.
I do too.
Barkley's on the fringe. I would say Barkley. I'd probably take him over Barkley. It's close, but again, you're talking about a guy that we don't really know where he's going to play. I do think where he goes is going to be a high volume.
Yeah.
I just don't expect him. I think he's going to probably end up in Los Angeles or the Raiders or Dallas or somewhere, and he's probably going to get a good workload. So I still like Barkley, but the issue is really Barkley's only got maybe a couple of years left of really that high end production, and Cook might only either. I mean, really, if Cook leaves the Bills, like you're really going to kind of be concerned. So I'd really probably put him right in that grouping. I think he would be right with those guys. Which
that was going to be my point, though. Does any running back really? Do we ever really assume they have more than a couple of years left in them, especially for Dynasty? And everyone says, "Oh, Barkley's got 1 year left. Cook's in. He's got plenty of years." Well, we've seen this with, what was it? Even wide receiver, Michael Thomas, Juju Smith-Schuster. Remember, they were wide receiver 1 and 2. Now both of them don't do anything 4 years later. So I don't love the argument of, he has 5 years left. We don't know. So
yeah, I really feel like, especially at that running back position, since we're talking about it, like you really do. You can lose guys very quickly. And they could even have those 1 year wonder type of years just because a lot of it predicates on the volume, But I definitely probably have White and Walker. Maybe I'd take them over Cook. But it's really close for me.
Okay, well, one last thing here before we move on to your faller. His tier is rather big, the third tier, so I won't go through all of them, but just stop me if you would take any of these guys over Cook, because right now he's ranked over all of them. So I'll go through the 5 in his tier: Pacheco, Jacobs, Javonte, Swift, and then Ramondre and Pollard. Cook over all of them, I think. Maybe Jacobs is close. Pacheco,
I would say Jacobs and Pacheco are close.
Those are close for you? Okay, and those are the two direct.
Yeah, the rest are rankings. Yeah, and like I have Pacheco at 11, Cook is at 12, Jacobs is at 13. So
it's close.
It's essentially basically whichever player your flavor is of that month.
It's just funny to see that the tier at like the positional tier is the same for Fantasy Pros and KTC, but it's 20 spots higher overall for Fantasy Pros. Gotta love the experts really hammering running back. So
I feel like in its own right, it's kind of created a more precedence because there is a lack of those bell cows, and you really just have a bunch of meh after it. And although that elite tier of wide receiver does fall off, there is still more like depth. You still don't have that elite tier of the receivers, but there is more. And like I said, when I'm looking at running backs, like after 24, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like they're valuable in Dynasty, but like I'm not really looking to go get that guy unless I think his role can expand. Other than that, I'll just plug in, Kendrick Bourne for that week. So like.
Let's take a look at your faller now. That would be Chicago receiver DJ Moore, who's somehow going into his 7th season. He seems like he's been in the league 3 years. He has finished as wide receiver 39, 16, 23, 18, 24, and 6. Excuse me, I get the hiccups. Last year, he had 96 catches on 136 targets, 1,364 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He is wide receiver 17 on both Fantasy Pros and Keep Trade Cut. Fantasy Pros has him 31st overall. KTC has him at 32 overall. So he is in your early 30s at wide receiver 17 in both cases. They seem to be fairly consistent on where they value him. Where do you value him?
So for me, he is my wide receiver 22 at the moment. And then our other ranker over at FTM Fantasy has him at 15. That's Chris Meany. And so 17 feels right on like an average there. You know what I mean? But for me,
it's amazing to see. Like if I have the tier board in front of me for Fantasy Pros, and it just goes to show whether you have them at 15 or 29, it's all rated on tier 4. Tier 4 starts at Michael Pittman at 15 and goes to Devontae Adams at 29. So even though you could be 7 spots off in difference, they're all, for the better part, the same tier. So sorry, go ahead.
And I would 100% agree with that. I really think that you're just splitting hairs at this point. It's kind of like, what guy do you think might be a little bit better longer term? And at the wide receiver position, we obviously opposite of what we're talking about with the running backs. The receivers, you do have a longer shelf life, and you are anticipating that. Now that he's been in the year and heading into year 7 doesn't totally bother me, but it does bother me that he's going to be 27.
Yeah.
This is kind of that prototypical type of tier where you start to see some regression. I'm not saying we're necessarily going to totally see that, but for me, when I look at my fallers, I try not to pick players that are like the obvious. It's not like I'm going to come on here and talk about Juju Smith-Schuster, like obviously. Treylon Burks, pretty obvious that these guys have fallen. Jameson Williams, like these guys are obvious fallers. For me, DJ Moore, I always try to look at that year prior to their fall off. Like, may he have a good year this year? Yes. But this is the perfect time to trade them because people still believe in DJ Moore long term. So when I talk about fallers, these are guys I want to trade. And this is a player that I think could have a potential to see a regression from this past career season. You saw not a career high in targets, but he did have a career high in receptions at 96. His 1,300 receiving yards was his career high as well. His 8 touchdowns were a career high. Everything was career high, career high, career high, career high. And why was this? Is because they keyed in on him. That was their offense in Chicago. You obviously have a team that is loaded with draft picks this year. They have the first overall. That could be Caleb Williams. Everybody would be like, well, I want DJ Moore now. Great. Well, you forget they have 9. And if they ended up with another premier alpha receiver on the outside, say Odunze falls to them, say for some crazy reason Malik Neighbors falls. Like, we don't know how this draft goes. We don't know what players get valued. Do quarterbacks get a run? We've seen it constantly in that wide receiver position. Say they bring someone in there. Even if they don't bring someone there, they wait till the second round. You could be looking at a Brian Thomas. You could be looking at Troy Franklin. You could be looking at another perimeter weapon in a deep receiver class that's going to only take stuff away from Caleb Williams in an already non-pass heavy team. So to me, DJ Moore feels like a player that's going to see potentially some regression. I don't think he's going to fall off the face of the earth, but I also don't think he's going to give us what we just got last year. And I think that's what makes it a perfect point to be, okay, maybe this is the time to make a move. He's going to be 27. It's likely he falls a little bit down in those rankings. If he has a bad season, he's going to be going into his age 28 season next year. And now you're trying to trade a 28-year-old wide receiver who has Romo Dunze, who's killing it on the other side, on the up and come. And now what are you going to do? You're going to get pennies on the dollar for him, where at the moment right now, I'm sure there's still a lot of belief in DJ Moore. And I'm not saying I don't believe in DJ Moore. I do. I just think that at this point, it seems like his trend should start to turn towards the downward way as opposed to continuing to rise like it did last season.
And that, we'll parlay the age thing there into my question, because for all intents and purposes, he's pretty much at the wide receiver age apex, where you would expect, it's going to start slowly angling down here in his productivity. So that's my next question. I know everyone's saying load up, go Caleb Williams, get rid of Justin Fields. I don't know if that's better for a guy who may not have all that many productive years. He can't really afford to, unless Caleb Williams comes in, CJ Stroud firing from week 1, he can't afford to sit through a year or two of a rookie learning quarterback. I know everyone expects them to just come in and be CJ Stroud from week 1. And I get it. He's a generational prospect, but are we sure he's just going to come in and be an obvious boost? And I get it. Justin Fields was more of a rushing quarterback, but as far as, the combination of him getting towards the age apex, a rushing quarterback or a rookie quarterback, which would you prefer? What's better for his value, do you think? Fields, Williams?
I'd almost say Fields.
Yeah.
I know it sounds crazy a little bit.
Close, though. Yeah, it's tough.
Fields is just going to
pepper him with targets. Unless, I'm assuming they didn't get an Odunze in this process here for now.
I still feel even if they did, I don't know if it would change a ton, because it just seems, I think Justin Fields can process the field. I'm not saying he can't. You don't see a lot of it. And he kind of just peppers DJ Moore because DJ Moore gets open. And I could see that continue into this year. But as the years go on, I could see that changing. But I think if they also trade somebody and stick with DJ Moore or with Justin Fields, it's also not that good either, because I think Caleb Williams has a higher ceiling, and Williams can rush. He's going to be more off script, which plays a little bit into DJ Moore's ability to just kind of get open. And DJ Moore does really well in the scramble drill type of stuff to just find himself in space and pretty much wide open. So I do like both prospects really for him. I wouldn't say that either one's worse. I would say Fields probably is because they probably continue to not pass as much. I think Caleb Williams would unlock a tier of passing for the Bears that they haven't seen in a while. So you could maybe see him push it a little bit more because they'll be able to spread the ball out more, but there'll be more passing volume to be spread. Do you know what I'm saying? As opposed to being locked in fully on DJ Moore, and it might open him up a little bit more and be a little bit more productive. I mean, 1,300 yards isn't not productive by any means, but I think there's a scenario where both work out for him. I wouldn't overly say that like one's worse, I would guess.
Both scare me is what it comes down to. Like you got a guy who, say Fields is the quarterback and doesn't turn it around. You could be seeing a 28-year-old receiver coming off not a great year. Or you could see someone coming off not a great year with a rookie quarterback. They could end up being CJ Stroud, or Fields could find his way. But there's a scenario where he loses value this year going into his age 28 season, and that scares the crap out of me if I own him.
And that's 100% true. Is that, I mean, if Fields doesn't really hit, you're toast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if they don't go after Caleb Williams, like, and you roster DJ Moore, like you're really hoping Fields at least hits to an extent. But I mean, he even arguably wasn't that great this year as a passer. I mean, he improved, he got better, but like he was still fine for DJ Moore as a fantasy asset. So it's kind of like, I don't think Fields regresses. I just don't know if he would get better. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, I still feel like the floor's there for him as a fantasy asset, but I think Caleb Williams could unlock a ceiling that we haven't seen if he does hit. But like you said, there's that big question mark of does he, so which is every rookie quarterback,
He can be a hit. He doesn't have to be a bust. He just, how many good quarterbacks have been awesome, but sucked as a rookie? Like Peyton Manning was terrible as a rookie. So just because he sucks as a rookie doesn't mean Caleb Williams is a bust. It just means, it takes time. Not everyone's Justin Jefferson and Joe Burrow walking in and lighting things on fire. So,
which is a fair point.
All right. And on that note, let's wrap it up. Once again, you want to tell everyone where they can find you? I know it's on the screen, but.
Yeah, maybe they're just listening there, and you never know. At Popes FFH on X is where you can find me. I'll have links to all of my work over there. And then obviously all the written work rankings and stuff like that is over at ftnfantasy.com. And then if you want to listen to another podcast, the FTN Dynasty podcast, it's where you can find all of my great opinions.
I swear you're the only one churning out as many daily rookie profiles as I am. Every time I see one, I go, damn it, he's got one out today too. Every day. You keep it up with me. I didn't think
I'm trying, I am trying. It's a lot. This is the first year I have a 1.5-year-old daughter running around the house. It's making it a lot harder than years past. I would crank them out like crazy and player threads, X, Y, and Z. This year, kind of sent them to free articles over at FTN Fantasy, but they're essentially the threads I used to do on Twitter. They're just on a website.
Doesn't get any easier. I have a 9-year-old, and it's just.
I know. I always thought like, when they were like under 1, that was going to be the hard part. I was like, once they're a little bit older, like they'll be able to entertain themselves, and no. It's the exact opposite. Worse. Now I'm just chasing her around the house, and I have no time to ever do anything until she goes to sleep, and then I don't get sleep.
each year it gets worse and worse, and then they move out, and you're all right. But
yeah, that's a while away. So
thank you all for tuning into the Mad Science Lab podcast, brought to you by the combination of the Fantasy Football Universe and the Fantasy Football Advice Network. I am Aaron St. Denis. You can find me on Twitter at FFMadScientist. Thank you again to Jeremy for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care and have a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow for the next riser and faller in the series.